introduction. My name's Christy Leonard. I'm an alcoholic. It's been a while since I've stood at the podium, but it feels really good to be here. Gratitude is an action word for me, and I'm really grateful to be here. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be standing here. My sobriety date is March 30th, 1997. I walked into the wonderful doors of Alcoholics Anonymous at the ripe old age of 15. And somebody told me, you don't ever have to drink again. So if there's any newcomers in this room, I don't care how young or mature you are, you don't ever have to drink again. It's just, you don't have to. If you don't want to, you don't have to. So probably like most people, I started drinking at like 7. Beer was kind of cool. But it gave me a headache, made my stomach upset, but it didn't matter because it was cool. I had a really awesome older brother. I came from a really, and still do, come up from a really, really awesome home. Great Catholic parents. I went to CCD. I got my first communion and my confirmation and told the priest I ate Oreos when I wasn't supposed to, and then I was fine. So it was like 10 Hail Marys and 50 Our Fathers, and you'll be fine. Just grew up in a good, my dad was my soccer coach, and life was awesome. And when I was 12 years old, I went downstairs and I smelled cigarette smoke. And I was like, oh, who's smoking? And it was my brother. And he was 2 years older than me. And I opened up the door and I was like, oh. And he goes, what? And I was like, oh my God, you're smoking. And he's like, look, meet me down here at midnight tonight and you can try it. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. What he was doing was he was like getting me to smoke so that I wouldn't tell on him, right? So my brother was, like one of my best friends. So I snuck downstairs and I remember like taking a McDonald's straw the night, like an hour before and like practicing to see like, would I be cool? Like I was like, do I suck? Would I come in? I was like trying to practice. Anyway, I snuck downstairs. I got out of the house. I smoked. It was a Camel Wide unfiltered cigarette. It was really intense, but the rush, that rush through my body was like, oh my gosh, I want this again and again and again. So he said, well, tomorrow meet me down here again, and we'll do it again. And I was like, okay. So the next night I snuck down, and we had a cigarette, and then he pulled out a bottle of liquor. And it was a prescription cap bottle, and he poured it. And I said, well, why don't I get the orange bottle, like the whole thing? And he's like, you can't hang. And I was like, so right off the bat, like I already wanted more, right? So I tried it. I loved the burn. It was great. It was intense. It gave me this rush. And so that was kind of like our thing. So my brother and I used to sneak downstairs at midnight after mom and dad went to bed, and we smoked cigarettes and we drank liquor. And I don't know what it was. It didn't matter. But I couldn't tell on my brother. Shortly after that, my dad lost his job of like 17 years. He worked for a really awesome, he was like a salesman, suit and tie type, came home with a Bonneville every other year. And he went to driving a school bus. And I, to this day, think that my dad is one of the most humble, amazing, just exemplary man that ever was. Great father. And he made sacrifices for his family. And that's important for my story. When my dad lost his job, my mom had to go back to work, which was great for me because, so she had to be home, like we had to pick her up at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I still got to sneak out at 12, and then my parents wouldn't be there, and I got to have my cigarette and my drink with my brother, so it was great. And then my parents just didn't understand me. I go into middle school, and they were just horrible people. They were great, but they were horrible. They didn't understand me. So I met this, you go to middle school, and you have all these new friends, and everything's really awesome. And we all decided we were going to run away. We were going to steal my best friend's grandmother's truck, and we were going to change the license plate. I lived in Virginia, so we were going to change it like every state. We were going to steal a license plate from a different state, and we had it all planned out. Well, I guess one of the moms got wind of it and called my mom, and so my older sister picked me up from school, and I just felt like the coolest person ever. So at this point, like I'm 13, and I'm getting picked up by the high school sister in the car, and my mom had asked, whatever you do, can you stay with her tonight? Make sure she doesn't run away. My sister's like, yeah, woo, we had so much fun that night. Lots and lots of alcohol, lots of cigarettes and some other things. And I remember passing out in the front seat of the car and my sister having to go pick up my mom from work. And my mom was completely oblivious, or so I thought. She thought I was just sleeping. For the first time, there were guys paying attention to me, and I was like, oh, this is just the best life ever. I'm pretty now. I'm, free to do whatever I want to do because alcohol just makes you do that. I'm smoking cigarettes like a cool person, and I just felt like life was great. What I didn't like, though, was the feeling the next morning, or not remembering certain things that would happen. After a couple of years, it wasn't fun anymore. And I remember sneaking my mom's wine before school. Like, I would pour it into orange juice, white Zinfandel and orange juice. Like, who does that? But I did. And my mom had, all this liquor that was probably, older than she was in the liquor cabinet. And we would pour it out and then, put iced tea and replace it, thinking that we weren't going to get caught. I learned later in life my mom knew the whole time. So my brother was in private school, and he got caught smoking marijuana for the ripe old third time in his life, going back into school, and got expelled and immediately got put on probation because they got arrested. It was a whole mess. And so all the attention was on my brother and getting him in, to rehab and to meetings. And I looked at that as, great, Dad's working 2 jobs, all eyes are on Mike, Mom's working all the time, I could party. And I totally took full advantage. When I was 15 years old, it was December 4th, 1996. And I remember that day because it was my neighbor's daughter's birthday, and I was supposed to spend time with her. Instead, I had decided to mix alcohol and acid, and it was not a very good experience. And I broke down and I hit my sister because she's my little sister. She was only 11, and she was standing in front of the liquor cabinet, and she just kept begging me not to drink, and I just punched her really hard and downed whatever I could get my hands on. I ended up getting taken to the emergency room and had to drink charcoal. I don't know if anyone's ever drinking too much alcohol and then had to drink charcoal, but when you're throwing up the charcoal and having acid in your body, it's just not a good experience. And my mom stayed with me the whole time. And the next day, a doctor walks in, and instead of saying, oh, you poor thing, you shouldn't drink alcohol, you shouldn't do drugs, you shouldn't do any of that. He looked at me and said, do you realize there are kids in this unit that are fighting for their lives and you're throwing yours away? The person next to me had leukemia. But I wasn't going to get leukemia, and I was invincible, and you're just a butthole, so I'm going to go back to doing what I do. My parents didn't really know what to do at that point except put me in rehab and put me in these meetings that my brother went to. I wasn't an alcoholic. I didn't have a problem. All eyes were on Mike. I was fine. And I could stop by myself, and I just wasn't going to drink anymore. That didn't last very long. I'd come home from school, and I'd sneak my dad's beer. My parents did put me in rehab, but I decided I was just going to kind of do that, pretend and just do whatever they said, and I'd be fine. What did it for me was, it was spring break. It was my sophomore year of high school, and I went out with some friends, and one night it was well, as long as there's somebody that's not drinking, I can go, because then I'll get home safe. So I can drink. As long as you're not drunk and you can drive, then I'll go out. Well, everyone got drunk. I got in the car. I was the one without the seatbelt. And I remember being really scared that I wasn't going to make it home. And by the grace of God, I did. And I got out of the car, and my neighbor was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I just drove with a drunk driver. And he's like, and? And I was like, oh, other people do that? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, okay, fine. All right, I can do it again. Did that for a couple more days over spring break. But one night I went out with one of my girlfriends, and she's like, I got 2 guys to go out with us tonight. I didn't know who they were. They were older, they were cute, like in their 20s. I'm 15. We went into D.C. They bought some stuff. It didn't matter to me what it was. I just remember nothing. I woke up the next morning just in a state of knowing that something had happened that night that I didn't want to have happen. And I downed some orange juice and vodka, poured the rest down the drain, and said, I'm never doing this again. I wasn't going to put myself in a situation anymore that I didn't have complete control over. And I say that with a smile because what's the first step? Admitting that we're powerless, right? So it was Easter Sunday was my first day sober, and I was trying to sit at the dinner table, and I had the shakes, and I'm 15 years old. I'm not supposed to be addicted to anything. I'm not supposed to have a problem with anything, so why am I shaking? It took me 30 days to go to my first meeting, and for 90 days, I introduced myself as I'm Christy, and I'm not an alcoholic. When I finally admitted that I was an alcoholic, I think the entire room clapped because they're like, here's the little girl. And I was like, oh, look, the only reason I'm still here is because you see these 5 hot guys in the front row? Like, that's the only reason I'm coming back. Like, that's it. These Danny, Donnie, Joe, John, and Jordan, like those 5. You know, like that was it. And I remember them telling me I needed to get a sponsor. And I was like, a what? I don't need another adult telling me what to do. I already got 2 of them, and they're on my butt all the time, and, you know, whatever. I got sober up in Fairfax, Virginia. It was the absolute best place for me at the time to get sober because there was a lot of other young people. And we fellowshipped. We learned how to have fun and stay sober. You know, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of ICIPA, but ICIPA is a big retreat that we have, and we have conventions, and you know, I was the girl that wasn't going to date Danny, Donnie, Joe, John, or Jordan. Like, they kept me coming back, but I wasn't going to date them because I didn't want to be the person at the wedding going, oh, yeah, you know, y'all know, I didn't want to be that girl. So even at an early age, I wanted the house and the white picket fence and the walk-in closet. I didn't want to work for it. I just knew what I wanted, and I knew what I wasn't going to do to get it because that's one of the reasons that I got sober. Years went on. I did get a sponsor. She was absolutely amazing, and she worked me through some steps. And I kind of felt like, you know, life was getting a little bit better. My parents were trusting me again. I wanted to go to Woodstock 99, and my parents told me I couldn't go, and I was like, but I'm 18, and I have 3 years sober. You should trust me to go. They were like, not as long as you're living under this house. So I moved out at 18, and 2 days before Christmas, my mom asked me if I was pregnant, and I looked at her and was like, no, there's no, and I start counting on my fingers. She took me to the doctor the next day, and I found out that I was, in fact, pregnant. And I was pretty embarrassed, and I remember going to a meeting that night and sharing that I was pregnant. And a good friend of mine, I was crying in the car, and he came and he sat in the car, and he looked at me, and he said, let me explain something to you. You're pregnant, you need to accept it, and you have about like 7 months to get it together. So just, you know. And I was like, aren't you supposed to be like comforting me and telling me it's going to be okay, and da-da-da-da-da? And he's like, yeah, no, that's not what we do in AA. Like, we call you out on your stuff, and we tell you to get it together. So his father was not really in the picture. He was not in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had moved back home and heard on the radio that Fayetteville had just found her birth mother, And it was that moment in time, because the night before I had prayed for some guidance, and it was that moment in time that I decided if I should place the child for adoption. And I did, and I found this amazing couple, and they're just great, and I was no longer alone in my pregnancy. There was a woman coming to me to my doctor's appointments and listening to the heartbeat, and it was beautiful. And for the first time, in a really long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt accepted. When I was pregnant, I was very embarrassed, and I took a step back from AA because I was so embarrassed. And I wasn't calling my sponsor, and I sure as heck wasn't working any steps. Went through the adoption, and, I have an open adoption, and I have an amazing relationship with my son, who's 19 years old, and he's like 6'3", and he's huge, and he's tall, and I love him. And he's always known me his whole life. And if I was out there getting drunk, I wouldn't be able to have that relationship, because his biological father was out getting drunk. And the couple of times that he did go to see him, my son's parents were like, I don't think so. I don't think so. So I fast forward a few years. I decided to start going back to meetings because I was grieving. I was grieving the loss of a child, even though he was alive. It was the hardest thing I ever did. And I got a job offer to go work in the Middle East. And I did. And it was great. And I loved it. And I prayed about it. And it came. And I went and I worked in the Middle East. And I met this amazing, gorgeous man who later became my husband. And great, wonderful, awesome marriage. But he was like, I don't know how I feel about you going to those meetings. I'm afraid you might meet another man and run off or something. Well, he had just come out of an affair marriage, a failed affair marriage. So he had some insecurities. I had moved to Fayetteville at this point. I said, well, can I check them out a little bit? Like, can I just kind of see what the meetings were like? And I went to a few meetings here and there. But I allowed my husband to become my higher power. He was everything I wanted him to be, We were doing the church thing. We were having kids. He had custody of 2 out of 3 of his boys, so I became like an instant stepmom at the ripe old age of 25. Life was good. I didn't need the rooms of AA. They're fine. I got what I needed to get out of the first, the first 5 years, when you finally realize what you do need or don't need. But I never picked up. Like, I never drank, no matter through the adoption, through my dry time, whatever. I never drank. January 26th, 2012, my husband had an endoscopy done. We had gone to the doctor about a month before, and he had some stomach problems, so he had an endoscopy, and they said everything was fine. We high-fived each other. We went home. And a week later, we get a phone call that said, hey, we need to see your husband tomorrow. And I'm like, tomorrow's Saturday. Like, we got football or something. They're like, yeah, we really need you to come. It's kind of important. So we went to the doctor, and they tell us that he has stomach cancer. 39 years old, he gets one of the worst cancers possible. And what I had not shared with you all at this point was my brother that I had been drinking with, who also is a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, was diagnosed with lung cancer at 28. And I lost him when he was 30. 15 years sober. He died and was cremated with a 15-year chip in his pocket. When I celebrated 16 years sober, that was kind of a bittersweet moment for me. I never thought I would surpass him. So this is like the second time that I'm dealing with cancer. And the doctor just kept saying he was too young. And I looked at him and I was like, my brother died at 30. What are you talking about too young? Don't you see these 11-year-olds in the pediatric ward with leukemia fighting for their lives? For 7 years, chemo, radiation, doctor's appointments, and then the pain meds decided to come into the picture. And you want to talk about questioning sobriety. Never even thought about Al-Anon, to be honest with you. Actually, and I just kept thinking to myself, he's in pain, but he's on a whole lot of pain meds, and I started grieving what I had before he had cancer. So I'm grieving again. And, you know, we got the you're cancer free, like you're good to go, like go back to your normal life. Every year around my anniversary, I would go pick up a chip here and there. Sometimes I missed it. I picked up a chip when my brother died. Life was still good. I still remembered being powerless. I still remembered, you know, having a higher power. I'm going to tell you what, I used my higher power in my husband's journey probably more so than I did in my first early years on recovery. But the part of the third step that no one ever really likes to talk about is the higher power that you have faith in. Sometimes we know he can move the mountains, but we don't always like where he puts them. And yesterday, a year ago, God moved my husband out of my life. Tony's cancer returned 2 years ago, and he passed away yesterday, a year ago. But I never picked up. I never even thought for a second, let me pick up my alcohol, whatever of choice. I didn't even start smoking again. I had a resentment towards my higher power. I had a resentment towards God. I said, how can you bring somebody so amazing into my life and then just take him away? I knew he could cure him, but it wasn't in the cards. So, you know, you go through the funeral, you go through all that craziness. I have 5 boys, so it was quite they didn't want to really show their emotions or whatever, but we got through it. We got through the service, and then, you know, everybody goes back to their normal everyday lives. And my best friend took me out to California for a girls' trip. And I'm going to tell you what's crazy. God is crazy. God's got a sense of humor, right? So I was like, you know, when you're grieving, there's like this pain in your chest, this knot that like just doesn't ever want to go away, and you think you're having a heart attack all the time. You're not sure if it's indigestion or what. And I remember just praying to God. I was like, listen, I'm going to need you just to take the pain part away. Like, I'm tired of hurting. Like, I can cry, but can you make the knot go away? And that was the first time I had prayed actually in a while. And I had a dream about a friend of mine that I got sober with, and I woke up the next morning going, what was that about? I find this person on social media, and I don't reach out to people, and this time I did, and we get to talking and come to find out that they're still sober. And I was like, and another one of the 97 babies are still sober. There was only like 3 or 4 of us left from that group. My best friend takes me to LA for a girls' trip. It was my first girls' trip in 15 years. And the person that I ran into or had the dream about lives out in California. We went out and hung out, and we were talking about different things. And one of the things he said to me was, when was the last time you went to a meeting? Because you are toxic as you know what. And I looked at him, and I was like, it's been a while. He's like, yeah, you need to go to a meeting. Because the problem is you're trying to control your kid's grief, and you can't. And I was like, yes, I can. He was like, yeah, you need to go to a meeting. You need to go to a meeting. I got back to Fayetteville, and I waited about a week, but I looked some meetings up, and then I went to a meeting. And I remember going, oh my gosh, they're all going to think I'm new. And then when I raise my hand for a year or more, they're going to think I'm a liar. Well, that was my first problem, worrying about what everyone else was going to think, because we're all messed up in the head, right? Like, we're all a little cray-cray, and we're selfish, and we think the world's about us, and everyone's looking at us. But I went in, and I remember reading the 12 traditions, and they just came right out. Like, I didn't even need the paper. Like, I just could ramble them off, and I was like, yes, I still got it. No, I didn't. I didn't. And after the meeting, I felt so good that I went to another meeting right afterwards. And then I went to another meeting the next day, and I was hitting like 2 meetings a day. And then my kids were like, Mom, are you going to make dinner? And I was like, oh, yeah. Just fend for yourself tonight. I got a meeting. And they're like, what are these meetings? And I was like, it's great. It's great. But I didn't have a sponsor. And I was like, I got to go find a sponsor. How am I going to find a sponsor with over 22 years? That's going to be kind of hard. But it's not about time. It's about recovery. And I needed to find a woman that worked the steps, that had a solid program, that wasn't going to tap me on the shoulder and say it's going to be okay, that was going to look at me and say, you need to accept the fact that you're grieving, or you need to accept the fact that you've lost your husband and it sucks and it's horrible and it's painful and you need to pray to God about it. And I said, I don't want to pray to God about it because God took my higher power. I'm going to let you sit with that one for a minute because that was where I was at. I found a sponsor. And she asked me how my prayer life was, and I said, oh, there really isn't a prayer life. She's like, yeah, I'm going to need you to get on your knees twice a day and pray. I was like, you want me to pray to the same being that took the love of my life from me? Yeah, okay. She's like, yeah, I'm going to need you to do it. So I did. And before my knees hit the floor, I was bawling. And all I could say is, why? I didn't understand why God would take somebody so amazing out of this world, why he would take my children's father. I didn't understand. But what I forgot, and I, going back to meetings and reworking a third step for me was the greatest blessing I could ask for. Because I started to trust in God again. And I started finding myself saying, you know what? Thank you for giving me 12 amazing years with a man that respected me, with a man that loved me. I'm deserving of that. And for me, that was huge. I was never somebody's girlfriend. I was like the one on the side, the one with the benefits. So I never felt like I was good enough. And my husband taught me that I was good enough. And when he left, it was like I had all these insecurities that my husband robbed me of, right? And when he died, it's like he returned what he stole. And so all those insecurities came back. But when I had faith in higher power again and my God, and saying, you know what, I'm going to get through this one day at a time. I may have a bad day today, but that's okay because the sun's going to come up tomorrow. I'm going to put both feet on the floor, and I'm just going to keep going, And that's what Alcoholics Anonymous taught me. And did I take a break from the rooms for a little bit? Yes, I did. I had to care for a man that needed me. But had I never gotten sober, had I never put the effort in and worked those steps and got grateful and, sponsored other people, and I wouldn't have been able to be there for him. I remember talking to his ex-wife saying, what is the worst thing you have ever been through in your life where you just really hated God? And she's like, my divorce. I said, yeah, but had you and Tony never gotten divorced, he never would have come home from Iraq. We never would have found out about his cancer. Aiden and Ashton, our 2 little ones, never would have existed, and Alec and Austin would have grown up without a dad. She's like, I never thought of it that way. And I said, God's got a plan. I don't always like it, but I have to have faith that there's a plan out there for me. And that's what these rooms have given me, And, today, my life it's awesome. My life is full of service, talking to other widows. I sponsor people in AA. I have a sponsor that I call. My sponsor has a sponsor. It's not always about, do I want to pick up a drink today? It's about, do I want to show up for life today? And they say that in the 12 and 12. In the beginning, in chapter 1, or when it talks about step 1, it talks about the young people in AA, and thank God they didn't have to go through those other 10, 15 years of, whatever word they say. We can look it up. But they don't have to go through that 10, 15 years of pain in order to find the solution. And I'm grateful that I didn't have to go through that, And I have, my kids grow up in an environment where there isn't any drugs or alcohol or cigarettes. My front door is not revolving because my husband taught me where I respect myself today, That's kind of a good feeling, I love giving back, I love, I'll share this. 3 weeks ago, 3 days after Christmas, I got a phone call from my friend's daughter. I couldn't understand her. And all I heard was paramedics, daddy, sissy, accident. And I ran out of Walmart, and I went to my friend's house. And her daughter and her husband were driving back to Georgia, and they were T-boned. And her daughter died. She was crushed. She was 15. And they say that when you can help somebody through an experience that you got through, then you have truly grieved, you've truly accepted, and you've truly become somebody that can give back and be of service. And that's a really awesome feeling, which is why I'm so big on sponsorship. I've sponsored women that I stopped sponsoring that called me years later because they were pregnant, and they talk about adoption. I have women that I mentor through the cancer journey, and I actually apply the 12 steps through that journey. The difference between alcoholism and cancer is a lot of times cancer patients don't sit there and think that they're pieces of poop, right? They don't feel bad about themselves. They rise above. But the journey's the same. The family awkward chapter, or the family afterwards chapter in the big book, I just read it. We read it the other night, and it reminded me of my journey. I took over everything, and all I can think is, thank God I never picked up. My kids still have me today. I don't have plans of picking up. I don't have some, amazing message or whatever. I'm just a mom that has gone through some stuff, But I think the message today is it's okay to have a resentment sometimes towards your higher power, because that means you believe in him. Because you can't believe in something that you don't get mad at once in a while. Thank you so much for letting me talk to all of you guys today. It's been a while since I've been at the podium, but it feels really good. And gratitude. It's an action word, So I'll keep coming back. Thanks.